Yeah, as Jim said, my background, give you a quick idea of my background. Industrial engineer by degree. Haven't done an ounce of engineering a day in my life. Immediately got into power plant construction of all things as a project manager. So the project management background has been really strong with me. And then really started my lean journey about 1998 with a company out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they said, Rick, you should really go down and get some operations experience down at one of the plants, one of the facilities we have in Auburn, Alabama. And it was only supposed to be 3 years. And 3 years later, my wife and I have 3 daughters. One 26 now, she's living in New Zealand. One 24, she's living in Northern California. And one that's 21, and she's going to school up in Maine. So great places to travel, but they didn't want to leave Auburn at the time. Things that make you go, where are they living now? They didn't want to stay in Auburn either. However, that was basically 19 years ago now that we've been in Auburn now. So really kind of planted our house there, and that's when I joined Auburn University and spent 10 years with Auburn. Then I went off on my own. And so that's, when you see Northern Sckye, that's just the name of my little company. Okay. And the LDIs that we're going to go through, as Jim said, we'll go through a few. Today is just an intro to 101, Lean 101. Okay. And so that's really what we're going to, some of the learning points that, we have a little over 2 hours, so it's going to be a crash course. Okay. And some areas that we'll talk about, I may skip over because we're going to go in much deeper or further in depth, okay? Like problem solving, PDCA problem solving. We'll have a whole class just on that. We'll have a 4-hour class. Another one on lean management system. And just talking to Jim a little bit, I'm through these dates out for now. It might get changed around a little bit, okay? Intro to kata. We'll touch on kata just a little bit today, just to understand what the heck is this kata stuff. And then strategy deployment. That might get moved up based off of all the hard work you all have been doing already. And strategy deployment is really taking what Dan talked about and looking at your vision, mission, values. And remember when we talked about goal setting? Organizational goal setting, and going, how do we deploy it throughout the entire organization so that everybody understands where we're going and understands these are the little things. If we improve these little things, it comes back to meeting our strategic plan. Okay? So today, though, we'll define what the heck is this lean stuff. The 8 ways, setting a direction as well. That's the strategy deployment piece that we won't get deep into, but I'll just touch on it. The importance of standards. For y'all that have been through lean already, were standards important? Yeah, why? Why are standards important?
Decrease variation and improve outcomes.
Do you want to just come up here? Here. But exactly right. It decreases the variation, doesn't it? All right. And variation is what gets us into so many difficult situations when it comes to especially problem solving. And then we'll talk the tools of lean, some of those tools. And I'll be flat out going to say, what's really nice about lean are the tools are not complicated. It's not Six Sigma, where you have to learn a bunch of complicated mathematics, and we'll keep it simple. And then also introduce this kata stuff. All right, so lean itself, it affects all stakeholders. And, I do like that term. Wouldn't it be great if? Wouldn't it be great if the system that delivers healthcare has our caregivers, that's our employees, medical, and administrators, right? Having pride in their work, less frustration, the job security, and the career growth. Wouldn't it be great if our caregivers had that? Yeah, and it is. That piece that Dan talked about too is going, it starts with us inside the hospital. All right, all of us, the entire staff. Because then the patients come in play. And that is, wouldn't it be great if with the patients there were no harm and better outcomes? We had caring encounters, less waiting and delay, and lower costs. Wouldn't it be great if we had that? Because if we can start looking at it from that perspective, then from the hospital, that's the stewardship back in the community. And having the stability and also that growth, making sure we're growing. If we're able to grow as a hospital, what does that do? Grow from a revenue perspective. What does that do? What is it? More income. Provides stability for who?
People that are working here, and the patients, and everything.
You see how this is starting to work all through it? It is that job security. In order to do that, we have to have career growth. In order to do that, we have to be given the best outcomes to the patients. It's this circle or triangle. Triangle of love, right? For all three. At the end of the day, it's about people and building relationships with people. Either building relationships with our staff, with our patients, and with our community. Okay, that's what Lean is all about. And so when we talk about it, it is continuous improvement. 2 words, right? What does continuous improvement mean? Always improving? Is that what I'm kind of hearing? Always striving to improve? How do we usually do improvement? We fix it sometimes from a project approach. Yeah, and I'm seeing the ways, right? We fix it, and then what happens? Yeah, goes right back to where we were, and then we try to fix it again. And so often, though, we actually look at continuous improvement from a project perspective. Let's work on this project. And with CADA, what we're going to try to drive home is, how can we improve everybody? Wouldn't it be great if everybody in the hospital improved a little bit every day? That's continuously improving versus project where we're doing this. Right? Again, this will be the importance of the standards too. But it's also this set of core principles and a culture. All right, and that's what we're going to go into next. What the heck? There's 5 core principles, and it's really a problem-solving culture that we're trying to derive. All right. So these 5 lean principles. And everything that we talk about is going to always be revolving around plan, do, check, act. Who's defining the value? The customer is. Yep. Whoever that customer is. Typically, it's many cases, it's the patient defining the value. But the customer, let's see, who is the ER person over here? Suzanne? And who is lab? So who's your largest customer from lab? Probably ED. It's interesting to always find that out with lab. So really, the customer definition comes from ED for you, right? Because that's your largest customer. And then you're serving the patient, right? Making sure the patient gets processed timely and hopefully gets better, right? So, but then once we understand the value and defining that value, then it becomes, we want to follow that, whatever that is, through a value stream. Okay? So let me give you a quick example. You all have gone to doctor's offices, maybe with a sick child, or for yourself. What's the first thing you have to do? Check in. Okay? What's the second thing? Now, how long does it take to check in? And do the insurance at the same time, yeah. Check in and insurance. Go. How long? 10 minutes to check in. Okay. Then what? You wait. You wait, right? Then what do you do? Wait some more. Okay. Then what do you do? You see sometimes you usually get taken back and the nurse kind of sees you, takes your vitals, right? How long does that take? 5 minutes, okay. And then, what do? Wait. And who are you waiting for? The doctor. And then how long do you see the doctor for? 2 minutes. And then what do? You wait. What are you waiting for? The bill. Usually a prescription, right? When we're going to the doctor's office, that's usually what we're going for, is the prescription, or maybe, right? So let's just go prescription in this case, okay? And so all that, right, if we look at just the touch points, the time that we were checking in, the time we were with the nurse, the time with the physician, and the time to finally get our little piece of paper that says, here's your prescription. That, even with the check-in 10 minutes, nurse 5, 2 for the doctor, 17 minutes. How long are we in there for?
4 or 5 hours.
God, I hope it's not. Is it really 4 or 5 hours?
An hour,
Hour and a half. All right, let's go hour and a half. Let's say it was a really good day. But then what we would do is go, that 17 minutes is quote unquote our touch time. The rest of that time from a patient's perspective is pure waste. And that's why when we talk about the value stream, that's what we want to do. We can follow a patient from emergency room all the way through discharge of inpatient as well. You follow that patient to understand where all these waste points happening. That's what we're doing, is following that service line. Because the third one is, what we're looking for is flow. Anybody familiar with beavers? What are they known for?
Stopping the flow.
Stopping the flow, dams, and they're damming up that river, right? That's what we're looking for. When we start walking these service lines, we want to be looking for beavers, the beaver dams. The beavers are okay. It's the dams we want to get rid of. So that's eliminating the waste. That's what we want to do with flow. And then pull. Pull is the fourth principle, okay? And it's performing work as it's required. I'm going to show you an example here from a breast cancer care facility that will really describe this even better. But even in our example from the doctor's office, right? If we could potentially walk in, but sometimes we have to call and make an appointment, right? Are we getting that appointment when we want it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's the sometimes no we want to always be going. That's not when we want it. That's the pull. How do we do things when it's required? And then perfection, and this is where we all come into play, because perfection, do we ever achieve perfection? Heck no. No, it changes. Perfection changes. Whatever we think is perfect, and once we get there, it's like, ooh, we can do better. But it's all about continuous improvement. Each day, every day, trying to get a little bit better, a little bit better. And then, like I say, the whole thing is, we're following Plan, Do, Check, Act. That's our problem solving. That is what we follow, no matter what. Okay? And then the other piece that I'll throw in there is we have to understand the direction. And by understanding the direction, that's the strategy deployment. So when I kind of come at a lean management system, it's all this incorporated, not just the tools. It's not just the tools. It's these 5 principles with strategy and following that Plan, Do, Check, Act approach. So breast cancer care visit example. Here we go. So this is actually a real story from a gal that I met. She was from San Diego, and she ran a breast cancer care facility in San Diego. And she had this vision, okay? Wouldn't it be great if, during times of uncertainty, women did not have to wait for getting an appointment, or most importantly, waiting on the results in determining if they have breast cancer? Wouldn't that be great? And when I met, Cheryl was her name, when I met Cheryl, my wife was going through this. So breast cancer runs in her family, and she was going through that process of getting the mammography and then waiting. What was she waiting for? Results, yes. Not to mention waiting for the appointment. So when we look at it from the 5 principles, in this particular example, the value really is having that right service at the right time, at the right price, and mainly that right outcome, right? Getting that outcome correct. All right. That's the value. But the value stream, you check in, right? Wait, and this was her data, by the way, because she actually worked in the emergency department. And so she, from a lean perspective, she waited 11 minutes, change. Waited 9 minutes, history obtained, 2 minutes wait, breast exam, and then no wait, and then she left, right? So pretty, I'd say, 50 minutes, 22 minutes of that touch time. Not too bad, okay? But what's missing? The results and treatment plan, but requesting the appointment. All right? So those two, when we look at this, so often, this is all we're looking at, is from here to here. From the lean perspective, we have to look at it from the patient's perspective, which is requesting that appointment and getting those results. And then the treatment plan, if it becomes a positive piece, right? So flow, what we're looking for is really where are the, making sure that the least amount of wait time, those triangles are wait queues, wait times. Making sure that we do it right the first time, right? Those are things that we'll talk about when we talk about the 8 ways. But it's the pull, that fourth principle, appointment when I need it and results when I need it. Because now all of a sudden, what looks to be not too bad, 50 minutes total time, a wait time of 22 minutes, right? Really is 10 days plus that. From the patient's perspective, it's 10 days. Stress. Not knowing. Those are all critical pieces that Cheryl in this case said, wouldn't it be great if we could eliminate those 10 days? And then what was really funny is the results were coming back in a postcard. I was like, wow, build that relationship. And then, so what they set forth by having this direction, by having this challenge, was every day, every clerk, every doctor, every RN was working towards that improvement to try to get to this vision. And in about 13 months, they were able to do it. Okay. And so that's where I look at the 5 principles, and I look specifically at the challenge at hand, making sure we are understanding the direction that I look at and go, that's a great example of Lean 101. So, like I mentioned, Lean is a problem-solving culture. There's reasons why we have these wastes, okay? And we'll go through each of these 8 wastes, but the waste itself, like waiting is a waste. That's just a symptom of a problem. All right? So if I have a bellyache, that's a symptom, isn't it? What could it be? What are reasons for bellyaches?
Yes.
Gas? Yep. What else? Appendicitis? Food poisoning? Yeah. A lot of reasons for a bellyache. There's a lot of reasons why we wait. So we have to get into that piece of root cause analysis. That's our problem solving coming in. What's causing that waste? What is actually causing it? And, you know, my wife and I, great parents. Come on, y'all can laugh. You know, we had 2 children. Our third child, 3 years old, had a bellyache. We had plenty of experience at this point, didn't we? With the first 2. Gosh, probably just upset stomach or gas. And so, you know, we just gave her a little bit of Tylenol and so had a whiskey and, you know, all was good. Because that, you know, Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen, that's what our experience taught us. And what was interesting is, as we went through that was our selected the countermeasure, right? Some ibuprofen, skipped the whiskey. And guess what happened the next day? Got worse. So that's when we said, okay, Dr. Rick, Dr. Karen, we're in our overheads, took her to the emergency room. 8 hours later, appendicitis. Yeah, 3 years old, her appendix burst. 7 weeks in the hospital, so she did a great job at that hospital of extending that length of stay. But that is all we're doing with the waste as well, is we are going to run experiments to go, what do we think is causing that waste? Select a countermeasure. And a lot of times our countermeasures are going to be a lot of our lean tools, 5S, or point of use storage, or total productive maintenance. Those are all the lean counter tools that we could potentially plug in to try to solve that problem. If we get to this, did we get to the root cause? What do y'all think? Is that a root cause?
No,
No, why not? Why do you say no?
because sometimes there's processes that could be fixed to eliminate the human error.
We do ourselves an injustice if we stop our problem solving at human error. What's the usual countermeasure when it's human error? Counseling or additional training. Kind of what you had mentioned is really what we want to do is dig further into the process to go, what really caused it? Medication errors are a great example. And I'll share with you one that happened that where it was literally the process broke down. And I don't know about y'all, but I just am really glad that in the cars that I drive now, there's a lot of air proofs in place. Because I make a ton of mistakes driving. And y'all perfect drivers? Are you? Any perfect nurses out there? No, we're humans. We're designed to make errors. So we want to make sure we're digging into the process, into that process. And when I talk about problem solving, it is plan, do, check, act. So let's just kind of go through. This whole top part is the plan. Okay? And that is, the first thing we have to do is ID the problem. IDing the problem is, I expect this to be happening, but reality is this. I expect, what's your harm rate?
We put a number to that.
Okay.
There's
Just a few. Okay. I don't know if I can play with just a few. We expect just a few. We had more than a few. I'll work with it. All right. That is the gap. Okay. We don't have a problem until we define the gap. Length of stay. I think you all said your length of stay was 3.7 days overall. What's your expectation?
3.7 days.
So we have no problem. Good. Okay. So we know some of our metrics. We just might not have targets yet, and that's okay. That's okay. This is where having targets are important because we can define that problem a lot easier. Okay. So we have a problem. Then we research it with data and direct observation. Okay. Two parts to that. Where do we get the data from?
Documentation.
You can get it from documentation. Past, what was that? Past experience. Yeah, that definitely can account for some data. Statistics, definitely. Statistics are real helpful. Pulling it out of the system. Is there any issues with data integrity sometimes? Yeah, what's that second part to researching? Direct observation. Remember when Jim said Gemba? It's your Gemba walk. Gemba just means workplace. That's all it means. It means you're going to the workplace to actually observe the process, to see for yourself what the problems are. So often, if we're able, and when we get into problem solving, the 4-hour class that we'll do, I'll share with you some examples of the power of the Gemba walk. All right? But it's very powerful to see what really is happening. You can't problem solve in the church here or in a conference room. This part requires us to go see the process, walk the process. Whoop. Then we formulate a hypothesis. And what's a hypothesis? Educated guess. Again, 2 words. Kind of like continuous improvement. What does educated mean? It has some science behind it. How do we get educated in problem solving?
Learning.
Experience.
This is how we're getting educated right there. And experience is a part of it, but it's data and actually observing the process. And then the second part of hypothesis, educated guess. And a guess is what?
Theory.
The theory. We don't know. We don't know until we run an experiment. And so that's where, in the do part, we're going to start selecting some ideas that we're just going to run and go, does this solve the problem or not? Right? In problem solving, the best part of it is quite often we fail. And my little rally cry is fail fast, fail safe, fail cheap. That's my little rally cry. What happens in failure? What happens when we fail? We learn. That's all our learning that comes in play. If we're not running experiments, how the heck are we going to learn? So that's what we want to do. Now, we want to make sure we're checking the results of the experiment itself, because if it did fail, we want to formulate a different hypothesis and run that experiment again as rapidly as we can. Select a different idea. That one didn't work. Let's try this. All right. And then the act, we're going to draw the conclusion. Okay? And, you know, the whole piece of drawing a conclusion, blue and yellow makes what? Green. Now, if I do blue and yellow and it makes, I don't know, gray. I'm colorblind. Let's go purple. What happens?
You drop something in there, then you won't.
We don't know, right? That potentially could be it. Yep, it could definitely be that, but we don't know. But that's where we're going to draw a conclusion going, okay, let's start over again. Let's try to figure this out. That's all PDCA is. It's running this rapid cycle as quickly as we can. So I'm going to play you this video. Afterwards, I'll ask you, well, why the heck did Rick ask us or make us watch this video?
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's nothing else left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right.
Why in the heck would I ask you to all watch that video?
That's what we do sometimes.
We do sometimes, yeah. Yeah. What learning points come off of that video?
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
That's a good one. Yeah. I'll share with you a quick story. Because when I saw this video for the first time, something screaming came at me of, let's just say, a failure of mine. So remember when I mentioned I moved from Minnesota down to Auburn, right? It was my first real, quote-unquote, leadership position where I was asked to be a part of a production control team. And I think we had roughly 12, 13 folks in the production control department. So I have to go back to Minnesota to the corporate office for this week-long meeting. And this is about 3 months into my stint, right? And I get up there, and Monday rolls along. I'm in this meeting, and I get called out of this meeting 5 or 6 times. And it's the Auburn plant, and it's the master planner. Her name is Eurista, and she's like, Rick, customer just called. This is what's going on. What should I do? Being the good, quote-unquote, leader I was, what do you think I said? No. What's that? I told her what to do. Yeah, I told her exactly what to do. This is what you should do, Eurista. All right. Second day rolls along. Same thing. Get called out of this meeting 4 or 5 times for calls from the customer. And my mentor, the person I actually had reported to before I moved to Auburn, his name is Ned. He was in this meeting. He saw this series of events. And Ned was great, okay? Because he calls me aside Wednesday. He goes, Rick, let's go out for some beer and burgers. And beer and burgers with Ned is a good time, okay? So we go to this place. We order our beer. Didn't quite order the burger yet. And he looked at me and goes, you must be pretty darn important down in that Auburn facility. And I, sarcasm at my expense. I'm like, Ned, just get to the point. And he goes, you really suck as a manager. And I took that I was like, huh? And he goes, if you can't leave that facility for a full week and not get called out as many times as you have, you're doing a poor job of developing your folks. And I took that to heart. I really did. And that's where, when I look at that video there, I had, the way I was managing the folks, leading the folks, I was literally keeping them stuck on the escalator, not coaching them through the problem-solving process. Because it is a lot easier to just tell, isn't it? Sometimes you have to, and you know, when you guys were talking about high, mid, lows, and a lot of times the high folks, high performers will actually do when Dan was talking about, will actually go and do it. My caveat is, you as a leader have to allow that to happen too. And I had high performers, but at that time, I was not allowing it. And so that's what I took to heart. And in a lean environment, if we are trying to grow problem solvers, you have to develop them and not solve their own problem, and not solve their problems. All right? You have to understand the scope of problem solving. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about problem solving too. Okay. So a little bit now, we're going to do a little thinking lean. All right. When I click this, you're going to see a series of shapes and numbers. What I'm going to ask you to do is memorize the shape and the number. Okay. So you'll see like 1 and then a shape, 2 and a shape. I'm going to ask you to memorize the number and the shape it goes with. All right? I'll give you 45 seconds just to memorize it. Oh, that was easy. Let's try it again. Mm-hmm. All right. Now on page 5, there's a blank slide there. Go ahead. Write down the number and the shape that match the number. All right, I'll give you about another 10 seconds. All right, go ahead and check your answers. Find out how many you got right. And just write it at the top of that blank slide, how many you got right. This looks all, yep. Looking for patterns, weren't you? Yeah. And that's actually how our brains are wired. We're looking for those patterns. We're looking for patterns. And anybody distracted by the countdown? Most folks. A little bit? Yeah. Distracts me just waiting for it. And which symbols do most people get right? And that is what you all were saying. A lot of times 1 for repetition. 10, because it looks different, plus it's the Roman numeral 10. 5, it's different, it's just the box. And then 7, because it's shaped like a 7. But at the end of the day, we are really looking for patterns. And we're looking at the pieces rather than the whole. Okay? And that's the key piece when we start talking about lean. A lot of times we're looking at it from a tool perspective rather than a system perspective. And a lot of times we refer that as silo thinking as well. Because we're really looking at just matching that one number with that one shape versus looking at it as a system. Now, for linear thinkers, sometimes, does this help anybody? Yeah, for some folks, yeah. You see the pattern a little bit better? Some folks will go July, backwards Coke, 7 under, I don't know. But for some linear thinkers, that can be helpful, right? Now, the reason I like this is because now all of a sudden, if we start looking at it, if I started looking at it from a lean perspective, the 1 or the backwards L, that could literally be 5S. Anybody familiar with the term 5S, workplace organization? That's a tool, lean tool. Or it could be total productive maintenance, another lean tool. It could be our problem solving, PDCA. It could be point of use storage. It could be, I don't know, standardized work. So we have all these lean tools. And sometimes we're looking at it just from a tool perspective and trying to memorize the pattern. And I like to use this example of using tools to problem solve. So there used to be a day I used to write this or draw this out. Now you get to see it up here. I could have drawn it now. That's a piece of wood. That's a piece of wood. Looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah. See my drawing skills? I actually drew this. Yeah, and that, what do you think that is? A nail. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's my drawing skills coming out. That is a nail. Now, what's a good tool to use to drive that nail into the piece of wood? A hammer. That is excellent. Excellent. Anybody ever try a different tool besides a hammer? What have you used? A shoe heel. Yep. What else? A what?
A better knife.
A better butter knife. Yeah, I can see that. I can actually. It didn't work well? Yeah. A rock, that's always a good one. Rocks are good, yeah. But, what? Pair of pliers? Yeah.
Another piece of wood.
Another piece of wood we could use. Some people say just turn it upside down and. Yeah. But the best tool is what? A hammer. A hammer. So at least we got the right tool now, right? We got the tool. And so there's our hammer. And we're going to start using it. What's wrong? It's the wrong way. So we chose the right tool. We just don't know how to use it. Okay? Same thing in Lean. We can choose the right tool. Sometimes we just don't know how to use that tool yet. Okay? So, all right. Let's turn around and actually use the tool correctly. All right? Good. Now we should be able to put that nail into that piece of wood, right? Here's the problem we're trying to solve, though. There's a second piece of wood. Are we solving the problem?
Not in the right place.
Not in the right place. And this is sometimes how we start looking at Lean just from a tool perspective and not an overall system perspective. We have to just practice. So like after today, sometimes just pick a tool and start practicing. All right? Like when we talk about 5S, just try to go back and 5S. The more we practice a tool, the better we will understand how and when to use that tool. Okay? And going back to our matching thing, when we start looking at Lean, if we're thinking Lean and with the numbers versus the pattern, what if we did something like this? Would this be easy to remember? 1. 2 was that. 3 was your L. 7 was your 7. 10X. This is when we start getting and understanding all the tools and how they fit into a system, including strategy deployment. And that's when we can actually start looking at it and going, Lean is a system. It's not a set of tools. That's the biggest thing I want everybody to walk away from today. Lean is a system. It's not a set of tools. All right? So, when we start looking at it, we have to piece together this transformation. And Dan did a great job today, and what y'all have been working on all the week is really understand that purpose. That's the strategy. Your vision, mission, values. Quiz. What do we do with our vision, mission, values? We make them simple. Then what do we do once we make them simple? Implement, educate. Then what do we do? Live them. Exactly. We have to live and breathe them. We have to make our decisions based off of them. Okay? And that's the whole strategy piece and understanding where do we want to be 3 years from now and even defining metrics to those, like we talked about, goals, right? Then we have to share that vision with the rest of the folks in the organization. Over-communicate. We have to over-communicate. And then we use what I call smart tactics, because if we have a strategy, now we have a much better understanding of where we're going to focus and potentially utilize those lean tools. So that the lean capability on that side, that's the process improvement side. That's the lean tools themselves. The culture change is the people development, the importance of developing our staff. Don't let them get stuck on the escalator. All right? You know, a lot of this is going to be new for some folks. And so we want to make sure we're developing our folks. And we develop through what? Practice ourselves, having them practice, experimenting, and then we are the coaches. Everybody in this room become the coaches. All right? We have to coach and not tell. And then this last little piece is if we can get the people developed, the strongest problem solvers, and that process improvement piece, all of a sudden we're empowering our folks to rapidly come up with ideas and engaging the folks to improve a little bit every day. And that's kind of this, I call it a three-legged step stool. Strategy, lean, or process, and then people development. And what happens in a three-legged step stool when you only focus on one, when you only have one leg? It don't work. What happens to the step stool? It falls down. It falls down. And that's what happened in my lean career. We focused initially just on the tools. Okay? And then a year and a half into it, as a company, we had no clue. Actually, at the time, Hank was here. The way the story goes is Hank at Auburn was actually working in the company I was working at, running some projects. But I didn't have a clue that that was happening. As one of the lead executive leadership team, we did a really poor job of that. Then we linked strategy into it, and now all of a sudden we got some traction. And then once we actually understood that people development side, that's when we really started getting not just traction, but sustainability. Okay, so it takes all three. If you focus on one, a lot of times you just fall down. All right. So, remember when we talked about the 5 principles? What were the 5 principles of lean? Value, good job. What else? Flow, yeah. Pull, yeah, yeah. Perfection. Value stream, yeah. So when we talked about that, the value is one of the things, right? And so a core principle is what we call value added. And if we kind of looked at the piece of the pie, especially in healthcare, you know, typically if you look at just our doctor's office example, you know, is it 17 minutes divided by 100 minutes? That's how I'm going to use simple math. How does that sound? That's 17%, right? That would say 17% of that time was actually touch time, potentially value-added time, right? But typically, that caregiver touch time can represent roughly 10% in healthcare. If you want a good example, I always look in ERs or especially ERs because there are so many, and I love ERs because of the fact that there are so many support functions that have to support the ER to drive down that waste. Because we're waiting for what in ERs? Lab, X-ray, yep. Results of some sort so often, being admitted, right? And so that's all that non-value added, waiting, redundant paperwork. We do have a lot of regulatory, though, too. And a lot of our regulatory stuff doesn't add value, but we have to do it, don't we? So I'm going to break that off separately because a lot of times that's just government related. We can't do a lot about that too often, but, you know. So what we really want to focus on is that 60% piece of the pie, that pure waste that we can't control inside our 4 walls. And that's our 8 ways. It does a little acronym called Downtime in red. So that's our friendly reminder. And we'll go through each of these. As we go through them, what I'd like for you to remember is what Dan talked about. Because these ways could be demotivating your staff. Remember when we talked about demotivation? And what is it that leaders can do? Eliminate, at least reduce. Eliminate's beautiful. At least reduce the waste. Eliminate if we can, right? That's our role as leaders. So, first one is defects. Has anybody ever come to work going, I'm going to make me some defects today? No? Not here at Hardin? That's good. That's good. That's a different problem that HR usually has to handle. But, defects, it's work that contains errors, rework, or lacks something of customer value. Another way, I think harms comes to mind right away. But even if it's paperwork or something that didn't get done right the first time is a defect, whatever that it is. And, medication errors, incorrect charges and billing. But this is one that was, when I was saying we have to sometimes dig into the process. Because this was actually a medication error that happened. And at the time it was same drug and different strength located right next to each other. Is there a chance to pull the wrong dosage, wrong strength? Yeah. Is that human error? Or was that a process error? But we have to dig deeper in that human error, right? It's a process error. What could we do to solve this problem? Yeah, that's actually one of the error proofs out there is differentiate where it's located so that we don't stand a chance of picking the wrong dosage. Right? So that is a really good example, though, of a defect that happened, and then they got into problem solving, and that was what they came up with. Let's relocate it in a different spot. Okay. How about overproduction? That is producing more than the customer or patient needs right now. And overproduction, this is an example from a cancer care facility near Auburn. And this set of paperwork and this set of paperwork are exactly the same, except for the 2 pages that are missing right there. Okay? That's an example of overproducing the paperwork. Do we need 2 sets of paperwork? And that's what we have to at least question it, right? And that's what that team did. They questioned it. They said, no, we could actually figure out a way so that we do not need both sets. It had to be signed. Yes, Jim?
So is one side requiring, in other words, one part of the organization requiring the left side and another part of the organization requiring the right side?
That's exactly what happened, Jim. Yep. And so that's the silo piece that's happening sometimes too, right? Sometimes we silo our paperwork in this example. Other examples of overproduction, I have seen this one so many times as I've gone to the Gemba and observed the process where nurses would actually pull the meds. So, you have that window to deliver your meds. They would pull the meds 15 to 20 minutes before delivery time. That's overproducing. Is there a chance for an error to happen if you're pulling the meds ahead of time? Yeah, but then the question becomes, well, why? Why were they pulling the meds ahead of time? What would be some hypotheses you all would come up with?
They're overworked.
They're overworked?
Lines at the Pyxis.
Lines at the Pyxis. Bingo. What was it? Lines at the Pyxis. And just observing the process, you could see. And the very last nurse, if you were the last one in line, you were going to have a medication error because you didn't deliver it within the window because you were waiting in line at the Pyxis. So at least now we understand potentially what problem we're trying to solve, and then we can start coming up with ideas to try to solve it. So that's over. Any ideas or any examples of overproduction at Hardin? Will you overproduce something? What?
I'm sure we do.
I'm sure we do. Okay. And this.
I just recently, just as a thing in the doctor's office, you say 17, 22 minutes. I just recently signed some paperwork. We worked on paperwork 30 minutes in the house before we went, not counting what I did after I got there.
Yep.
That's what you did
I know that there was a lot of information given.
Yep.
That wasn't necessary for me to perform.
Exactly. That'd be overproducing. That's a great example of overproduction right there.
We use a lot of paper and registration going from one department to the next department.
Yep.
Lab and radiology where we have to make more paper because certain people, like radiologists demand it.
Yep, yep, yep. There definitely is that aspect sometimes too. And it's just all we want to do today, and we're going to, one of the things I'm going to ask you all to do, and I'll give a form at the end of the day, is just start getting the eyes for waste. Go observe and see what kind of waste we have in our processes. Okay. And by the way, something that is overproducing could be a defect. It's just trying to get the eyes for it. I've actually seen, I was at a Dairy Queen one time, saw all 8 wastes in one example. So it literally can be multiple wastes happening with that one thing that you're observing. Waiting. Do we wait for anything? What do we wait for? It's what I find interesting is healthcare even has a room named after this waste. Things that make you go, You know who the waiting room is for? Back in the day, let's go way back in our time machine. Family, yeah. Fathers, especially when births were happening, but family to wait. And what do we use it for now? Patience. And so that's that piece of a little bit every day. How can we reduce the waste or even eliminate that wait time so that the waiting room can become back in its history lesson, who it's meant for. Okay. Not utilizing people. And this is waste due to not really engaging our employees. All right. So this is an example here of we call it a learning board. So if your staff, y'all ever have an idea system at Hardin back where staff could actually put in ideas?
Yes.
And what type of system do y'all use for that?
There's like a suggestion box.
Suggestion box. Yeah, and so when we get into lean management system and different training, I'll dive deeper into this. I do not like suggestion boxes, personally.
We have staff you can help with your KV core. Would that be considered a suggestion?
Okay. Report process. Yeah. And why don't I like the suggestion box? Why do you think I don't like it? It's impersonal. Yeah. Yep. So often we don't. If you put something in the suggestion box, do you hear back? No. And a lot of times, I've seen it in healthcare. I've seen it in manufacturing. It was always hilarious. You open the box, and there's some fascinating things you'll find in there. And it's not the piece of paper you're anticipating. And so what I liked about this is a very visual system. The red just means, hey, staff identified a problem and had an idea to try to solve it. And then the yellow was nothing more than it's active. We're trying to implement that idea. And green means it was implemented. So it's a nice visual system that each department can utilize to try to engage that staff. And you know what's interesting is as we get into strategy deployment and we start coming up with what each department is going to be focusing on, then the idea system works even more magical because now people have an idea of, okay, these are the types of ideas we're looking for. I'm not looking for, hey, let's add Dr. Pepper to the break room. I'm looking for small ideas to actually make the improvements that will fit back. Oh, I heard. Ideas for making the system work better, exactly. Exactly, Jim. And like I say, we'll dive much deeper into this concept in a different class, but I'll kind of leave you with this. It's also managed daily. You manage it daily, and it's the leadership, the department managers that are actually managing it, trying to get that staff engaged. You know, and some organizations actually use what's called a debrief. What went well, and what could we do better? And then that should lead us to the ideas on the idea board as well. So, all right. Transportation is the fifth waste. That's excessive movement of patients, medicine, supplies, or specimens. Do we have to transport things in a hospital? We do. I mean, at some point, we do have to transport things. It's how do we, this is a great one of how do we just reduce transportation. Especially with hospital. I haven't been to your hospital yet. Can't wait to get there. But somehow, some of those hospitals have been around for a while, and it's just like this, it's a maze. And, but it's looking at it going, okay, why are we transporting that? This is just an example. This is from that cancer care facility where they would, because each physician had to have it, their files documented differently, that you couldn't just put the file back and right when it was done, they would stage them there, and then that would cause excessive transportation. And so it was like, okay, well, why each physician handling it, the filing system differently? So, inventory. Is it important, or is it good to have too much inventory? In a pandemic, I know. Yep. And that is actually a key point, and we'll touch on that. But typically, is it good to have too much inventory? Why?
From a revenue perspective, it's all sitting right there.
Yeah, it's money waiting, right? That we could be utilizing for something else. Exactly. Is it good to run out of inventory? No. And that's where, ever hear the term just in time? That's where it gets a bad rap. Because folks think just in time means you just bring in the inventory right when you need it. And that's not what it means. It actually means having the right amount of inventory. And we have to define what that right amount is. And so I actually use Thanksgiving typically, but we can use the pandemic. But Thanksgiving, you know, what are some of the things that you're buying at Thanksgiving that you want to make sure that the grocery store has enough of? Turkey, what else? Cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, Cool Whip. And so do the grocery stores know that? And do they keep that kind of high stock throughout the year? And when do they ever do it? Just the holidays. That's the right amount. That's when they're going to buy more based off of their demand. Okay? And that's what just in time means, is just understanding that demand. Motion. That's the movement of people. Very similar to transportation, but that's the motion. I bet you in EVS you have a lot of motion. Right, kid? Yeah. This particular one, I just chuckled at because what do I have to do in order to wash my hands? Yeah, I have to move a bunch of stuff, right? And then once my hands are clean, what do I have to do? So just a good example of excess motion, right? That could lead to a defect even. But other examples of motion is looking for information, looking for materials, looking for a wheelchair. Anybody ever go looking for a wheelchair? That's extra motion. That's waste. That's waste. Looking for supplies in EVS ever? Sometimes? Yeah, but that's that excess motion that we want to try to eliminate. And the last of the 8 wastes is what we call extra processing. And that's extra effort or activities that does not add value from the customer perspective. And my favorite story here is one that just happened recently. It was redundant care plan entries. Your nurses do care plans at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on inpatients. Do you have to document your care anywhere? Yeah. And that's hospital, they did the same thing, document the care, right? So we kind of looked at it and just said, all right, walk me through it. And their fastest person being able to document care, it took her 20 minutes to document the 9 a.m. care plan for one patient. 20 minutes times 6 patients is what? Yeah. And this is our fastest. So we actually rounded up to 30 minutes ago. Most of the folks were taking 30 minutes. So for simple math, that was 3 hours of time just to document 9 a.m. You also had 10 a.m., 11 a.m., noon, 2, right? So it was, of that 12-hour shift, we calculated it was 5 hours of just clicking. And I counted the number of clicks just for the 9 a.m. It was 570 clicks. Carpal tunnel. Yeah, and we kind of just said, yeah, we're click nurses. That's documenting care. Does that have anything to do with delivering quality care? So we took a hard look at that, and because it was costing them $600,000 a year just clicking. And so far to date, they have reduced that in half. By going in depth, and I'm talking in depth of every care plan, looking for redundancy and those extra processes. And some of the care plans were even redundant where they're the same thing. So that's where that extra processing can actually hurt. And do you think it's frustrating for the nurses? Yeah. And that's exactly why we actually focused on that project, was to try to give the nurses something back, some of their time back. And it was 2 hours of overtime a day that we gave back. So we'll take a quick break, but that is actually one of the things I'd like for y'all to go back with. And I've got a sheet to help you with, but pair up with somebody, get out to the gamble, get out to the workplace, observe a process for like a half hour, and just start getting the eyes for waste and see what happens, okay?